everyone's going to be coming at this from a different perspective. What I'd like to do at the beginning here is tell you a little bit about me to start. So I'm the founder of Bento Projects, which is a web application and business development company that's about 14 years old. My partner is Jennie in this business. We have another partner, Dan, as well. And we also recently set up this space here and downstairs, Bento Miso, which is a pretty thriving community of creative technology people involved in games, arts, web development, and that sort of thing. So people come here, and yeah, what do I say here? It's a place to where people from the game, web dev, and creative communities come to learn from each other. It's a place to get stuff done with like-minded creative professionals. It's a place where community comes together to prototype ideas. It's a place where people come to play, test, and break stuff, to iterate and evolve. It's an inclusive place that encourages everyone to share their ideas, everyone to participate. It's a place where creators can tell it like it is. And it's a place where new things are created daily. And it's really important for us to host workshops like this to give people, as many people as possible, an opportunity to access these technologies that are becoming more prevalent and learn how to use them and sort of make them their own, right? And to do important things with them. Because I think the most exciting thing right now is that, and this blows me away every time I wake up in the morning, I can wake up, you can wake up in the morning, and if you have access to the internet and a computer or even a phone now, right, you can write words that are seen all the way around the world. You can take a picture of your lunch and everyone around the world can see, that has an internet connection, can see this. This is pretty amazing stuff. And when you consider that, you can consider how this sort of contributes to your sustainability as an artist, okay? And sustainability is my role in this community. I talk about the creative, financial, business, and intellectual stability of what people do here. I mentor a lot of people here to do that. So, sustainability to me is what it means to survive and thrive, doing what you love, and achieving your goals. All right? And I always define this here, and I almost start all of my presentations this way, regardless, is to sort of like double check and look what that means there. So we've got to talk about your goals and values, okay? And these are two different things that really contribute to why you would be putting your work online, in my opinion, okay? So your goals are, you're going to look at this and you're going to say, I'm looking at my short and my medium and long-term goals, and at the end of this, I want to be a successful artist. Successful being defined that I own my own studio, or like my work is seen by millions, or that I quietly get to wake up every morning and do exactly what I want. Everyone's got a different measure of success there, right? Or goal, and their values are how you value what you put into your practice, right? What's important to you from that. I want to leave as little footprint as possible. Collaboration is extremely important to me, etc. These kinds of things, and it's going to be different for everyone. And the nice thing is that when we're working on the web, you get to explore that, do those things, and then make changes. When we print something out and make something physical, even a painting, or even a photo, a physical photo, and that sort of thing, we often don't get the chance to take it back when it's out there, right? That's the discipline and magic and horror of art making, right? But online, though, we have a chance to explore, iterate, and change. And modify based on a lot of different things. We'll talk about that a little later. So we like to talk about the true cost of your sustainability. So when I sit down with people, a lot of the time I ask them, how much it costs to be you? And they're saying, I don't need much. My rent is $1,000 a month, and this is this, and that's that. And I said, that's great. And you have a cell phone in your pocket? Yeah. Do you use that for business calls and you make calls on that? Yeah. Do you take a bus pass? Do you use a bus pass? Of course. You're a game maker, for example. Do you have a subscription for any online MMOs? Because that's actually costing you, not just in terms of your enjoyment of playing this game, but you might be learning and researching through that all the time, or connected to communities that you need to continuously engage in, that you'll be developing for your game, right? Artists have the same questions. How much does it cost to do what it is that you do, right? Metrics is success, and this again ties directly into your goals and values. This is all different for different people. Okay, so for example, is it that I wake up every morning, I love ramen, packaged ramen, not the fancy, $15 ramen. I'm talking about like, 99-cent ramen. I'm gonna wake up every morning, I'm gonna eat that. I got no kids, no dogs to worry about, no anything like this. It's no big deal. I'm just gonna eat this every morning, and I'm gonna dedicate all my time and resources to doing what I wanna do, right? For some people, as long as they can meet that level of success, that's a metric that's gonna work for them, okay? Chances are not everyone here is of that same opinion. I have a dog, so I'm lying. Okay, product and customer development. So to me, a big part of sustainability is considering your product, in your case, the art that you create, and the customer and audience that's willing to appreciate it. Now, I'm assuming because you're here and you want to put your work online, you're hoping people see it. And I'm going to even assume one more step, and you can stop, and if someone stopped me here, you wouldn't mind getting paid for your work. Okay, so like any other thing, this requires a bit of business savvy. And by business savvy, it just means understanding these things and understanding that you have an audience to talk to, okay? And I think this is really important for artists to consider, because if you just want to make art and you're completely happy with whatever other job that you have or anything else you're doing that's contributing to your current sustainability, then make art. Make art. If you get to show it in a community gallery or for your friends or family or just for yourself, fantastic. There's no value here where I'm saying that's not an artist, okay? I'm not gonna get into that discussion with you. But I'm assuming that you have an audience you wanna connect with, and so you're gonna have to listen to them to different degrees, all right? Iterate. Again, what I was saying earlier is that the web and your sustainability and all these kinds of things all benefit from iteration. You don't just keep trying to do the same thing over and over again, no one's responding, and you think that it'll change the next day. Okay, if you get feedback, you have an opportunity to iterate. And again, your portfolio site is an amazing thing like this. If you had spent $5,000, and let's say that was no big deal for you, but let's say $5,000, right, on a website that you couldn't change afterwards, okay? And you put your art up like this, and the next day you decide you're all about the watercolors, okay? And you go up to your web developer and you say, okay, I've switched to watercolors. This heavy feeling that I've created to frame my photos and all this sort of thing is not appropriate anymore. I want to make a watercolor site for the best showcases my watercolors, all right? Well, A, you should be allowed to do that, especially if people are saying, hey, I love your watercolors and I want to pay for them. And B, you shouldn't be told that you need $5,000 again to make that happen, all right? And lastly, and this is the most important thing for artists and creative types and people producing their own work of any kind, is to value yourself and the work you do. Value what you do because it'll allow other people to put a value on it. If you do not value what you do, I guarantee you no one else ever will. People might like it, people might want to support in different ways, but it will have no value that you'll be able to sort of parlay or bring into your sustainability. Okay, I'm not saying you won't get fans and people that are coming up to you. Listen, in this place with the kinds of people that work in here, they come all the time, they get really excited and people come up and are really supportive of their work, but they don't have a dollar to put towards it. That's really good, and that might be okay for the ramen option, but everything else, not so much. Anyone have any questions so far? And also, maybe you weren't expecting me to talk about this, but I can't not. So, presentation and engagement are key tools in developing sustainability for your practice, and is sustainability for your inspiration. And the very fact that you can present things online and engage this community is going to feed you in ways and inspire you in ways that you have heard about, that you think that you have people you admire have and you imagine are happening. This can happen to you even in small ways that you can actually measure and grow. So let's start with some non-artsy stuff. Let's talk about domains and hosting and staking your claim on the internet. So, apple.com, bentobox.net, cbcnews.ca, dmg.to, all of these are domain names, okay? And a domain name is, you'll notice I did not put the www in front of that. That's not actually inherently part of the domain name, but it can be part of the address, Okay? All of these have 3-letter extensions at the end, and each of these are the top-level domain extensions. Oh, sorry, some of them are two-letter. But these are, the dot part there is the extension that identifies where this domain is coming from and the type of service that it is, potentially, in theory. But that can be subverted, and we'll talk about that. So .com is commerce or commercial. Okay, and it's the most popular domain, and you'll see this all over the world is used. .net is a variant network. I actually don't remember the history of why the .net is there, but it's a less popular, pervasive one. .ca is a country code one, Canada, right? And .to is not Toronto, but...
Oh, an island.
That's right. This island is actually being eroded by like the ocean is rising, and the island is I don't know if anyone knows this, but it's actually being eroded, okay? And one of their biggest GNP contributions to their GNP is the licensing of .to. There's another island, Tuvalu, also has a similar thing. They both have, the islands are, small island states, or countries rather, are having a problem right now.
What's the other island?
Tuvalu, or .tv. So these companies, or these countries, countries have an option of how restrictive they want to make these domains, right? So in Canada, you have to prove you're, in most cases, or at least pretend that you're a Canadian citizen or business that is operating legally within Canada, okay, to get a .ca. Okay, .tv and .to, they've actually left it wide open because they're making money from this for people who want clever domain names, right? So for .tv, they charge a premium for these, for example, and by charging a premium, they make a lot of money every year that they bring back into their economy with something that doesn't cost them anything. Very minimal administration fees to actually deal with. Anyway, I just thought I'd share that story with you.
I have a question about .org and its popularity.
Yeah.
Coolness factor.
So here's the thing, .org is usually set for not-for-profits and organizations that are generally not considered commerce. Doesn't mean you can't sell things, and in fact you could have a completely commercial or commerce-driven site with .org, but it's not necessarily, in terms of popularity, we're going to talk about search engine stuff in a little bit, but if I have henry.com and henry.org and they're two different things, or you have henry.org and I have henry.com, Google's going to like .com better.
Custom regulated, like the institutions.
Yeah, ICANN, International I'm sorry, I don't remember all the initials here, but ICANN sends you out an email with every domain that you own once a year that says, hey, is all this information true? Now, you say yeah, and if you don't do anything, they assume it is. If you go back and make a modification to your domain record, then it isn't. So, or you've updated it. This only really comes into play should a legal action be taken against you. So it's important to keep these things current.
It's really important to keep your email address associated with your domain account, because if you lose access, oh sorry.
Yeah, I'll be covering about this in a second actually, and what Jenny says is actually extremely relevant and extremely true. We're going to talk about this, and I cannot stress how important this is, but we'll get to that. There's a whole thing on that coming up. So let's talk about how this works when we get a domain name and we have files on the internet and all that kind of thing, and how this all comes together. So here's the internet. It's a series of cubes, okay? Not tubes. Yeah. It's a series of cubes in this, and cubes are representing servers, basically. And servers are basically just computers. That's all they are. But they're usually not set up for humans to use. So essentially, they exist very often in racks, like anyone been to a video editing bay, or if you performed on stage and you've seen an effects rack or an amplifier rack mounted kind of thing. It's just usually like they're a storage unit high, and they go in and there's no keyboard or anything like that. That is typically a server. A server can also, and almost anything can be set up to be a server. Jenny's computer right now runs a lot of our versions of our client work on her computer as a server that I can connect to, and anyone on the network that she's in can connect to. So a server can be many things. In fact, I've even seen cell phones be set up to be run as servers, and iPads and those kinds of things. Not recommended for running Amazon, but for technical demonstrations and stuff like that, it can be a good thing. So somewhere on there are your website files, okay? And one of the servers based on a host that you select will contain your files, okay, out there in the internet, all right? And that your files are identified on the server by an IP number. And maybe you've seen this before. Here's an example one, 192.168.255.255, okay? They are not always 4 sets. IP 6 is here coming, and it's another like 2 sets of numbers. Because if you can imagine every website needing an IP number, there's a lot of websites. So even though that seems like a lot of numbers, we're actually running out of them. But they're fixing it, so don't worry. So your domain, you register a domain in a registrar, and a domain registrar allows you to select your .ca and your .com and that sort of thing, and you register that. And it gets populated to domain name servers. Okay, the IP number is associated with your domain, and it gets set up to DNS servers. And an interesting thing about DNS servers is that there's a lot of them, and they're a relay kind of system that goes up. So when I make a change to my domain name or where it's pointing or that kind of thing, it doesn't just change everywhere right away. It can take time. It can take up to 48 hours in some cases to populate across the entire world. So I don't know if you've ever experienced this sometime, but maybe someone's, one of your favorite sites has been, that you and your friends go to, and a site has been updated, and you see one thing, and you go to their house, and they look at it, and it's completely different, and it's not through any settings that they've changed or any preferences they've configured. It sometimes means that an update has been pushed. Like for example, I haven't seen the new Twitter updates that everyone's been excitedly yakking about, but apparently the Twitter site looks completely different and is really weird and nobody likes it. I wouldn't know because it looks the same old thing to me right now. This may be related to this, and may be related to that they're rolling out to different users, different things, but it's important to note that when you make a change on this level, things are never fast. Rarely, especially when they need to be fast, they never are. So
it would take 48 hours or like a lot longer?
No, about 48, never more than 48 hours.
Okay.
But, and I'll give you some tips actually about some services that are faster. One we deal with is usually within like 10 minutes usually, like it's really fast. But there's a lot of factors though.
So are you talking about changes on the level of like changing the domain name or like swapping out some pictures?
Changing the domain name.
Oh.
So yeah, so the domain name. Not swapping out data. Good question though. So the DNS servers translate the domain name to the appropriate IP number and point back to your stuff. Make sense? Or as much sense as it needs to, because really the only reason why I'm going through this stuff is not because I want you to become an expert in in internet architecture or anything like this, but to understand what you're buying and why you're buying it, so that you don't get talked into the things that you don't need, essentially. So this is the basic concept right here. So in this case, in this sort of simplistic world we're creating here to make it simple for ourselves here, is that the domain name equals your IP number. All right? So what's in a domain name? First of all, the shorter, the better. I'm giving you some tips. You don't have to agree with me on some of these things, but I'm going to tell you why I think these things are important. The shorter, the better, is so that you can easily say it if possible. If you can memorize, it makes it easier for people to memorize. It also takes up less space on a business card. Nothing's worse than laying out your brand new fancy domain on a business card and realizing it's 150 letters long. Okay. Sometimes we can't help it because for option 3 here, which means we might want to use our names, and our names are important to us, and sometimes we have long names, and that's just the way it is, But it's important just to consider trying to keep them short. Okay. Avoid cute names unless you're really going to commit. So it's like tattoos that way. Yeah, it's a really good way of thinking about it. So like, you know, I saw some cute ones recently, but essentially if you have a cute nickname for yourself, okay, there's nothing wrong with using it if this is how you are sort of branding yourself in context with the work you're doing for the foreseeable future, right? Like if you've been using it for 20 years and that's your nickname, I think it's a pretty safe bet that if you want to be identified professionally that way, you could use it, all right? If you're sitting around and thinking about this and like, hey, you know, sometimes that one guy called me, you know, Cat, you know, and, you know, no one ever called you Cat, but you thought that was kind of cool, maybe not use Cat because it's not very identifiable for anything, all right? And I say use your name if possible. And we're going to talk about privacy in a second here, particularly since many of us most of us, all of us are women in the room today. So I want to discuss that a little bit actually. Use your name if possible. And then consider what it means when you say you're a .ca. Now, it doesn't mean you're only doing business in Canada, but it does represent a pretty real connection to you being in Canada. That is a plus for some people. It's also potentially cutting you out of things in another way. And it really depends on your work, your market, and how you choose to represent yourself. And I can't give you a plus or minus, like I'm giving you plus or minuses. I can't tell you which to do. I'm just saying consider what it means. Also, it's not a really useful technique that if the domain you want has been taken, and that but the .ca is available, and you decide to take the .ca, not a really viable technique for lots of reasons. If it's a major brand or something like that, they can knock on your door and say, well, you know, we actually are trademarked worldwide. We never grabbed the .ca one, so we're going to have to ask you to stop using that. That can happen. Another more realistic example is if it's a .com and it has some legs underneath it and it's been around for a while and that sort of thing, it will overtake your results in search and that sort of thing. And search results are kind of a big deal. So you really want to be careful about just grabbing something that exists and adding .ca to it for that reason. But if it's something unique to you and something, or you're involving your name or something like that, there are benefits. Particularly if you're like, you know, really pro Canada Arts Council, all that kind of stuff. Oh, yes.
I find, and this is more of like anecdotal evidence, but I find that in creative ventures, it's better to use a .com because Canadians don't really support their own talent. This
is true. It can be, there's a perception, you know, it's like the local band syndrome, right? Like nobody cared about Smashing Pumpkins in their hometown, but everyone cared about Smashing Pumpkins outside of their hometown, right? Because Smashing Pumpkins is a local band to someone, right? Same deal with Radiohead, same deal with everyone. So it can be sort of an impediment, you know, sometimes. Impediment? Impediment. Something like that. So let's talk about hosting. And hosting is where you put your stuff. And wherever you put your stuff, that's your home. So there's a few things to consider with hosts. And we're going to talk about two concepts quickly here, storage and bandwidth. And this is what every host is selling you. Okay? They have other features and other things, like a lot of other things, but this is fundamentally what they're selling you. So, storage. How much space do you need is a question. Are you going to use FTP or file transfer protocol to store and move large files? This can be an issue for collaborative work, but there's also solutions like Dropbox and things like that, which we can talk about as well. But sometimes you're doing a lot of private access, you know, video sharing or something like that, and so having a lot of space is useful to you. The truth is almost every host is going to give you a chunk, like more than you need most of the time now. But it is something to think about. In general, 10 gigabytes is plenty of space. To put some space, do you know what I'm talking about when I talk about gigabytes and sort of space like this? So when we talk about the sort of storage here, this is a 32 gigabyte iPhone 5. I can store like about a year and a half worth of music on here, and probably like 6 months of photos of me taking pictures at least twice a day. And I can also put in a lot of applications, and then I'm maxing up my space. So what does that translate into? Websites and things like that? More than you need most of the time, because you're only going to put in some of your work, and you may not be using the storage as utility for you to collaborate or do other things. So 10 gigs should be plenty. So bandwidth, the concept of bandwidth. So who is avoiding watching television by downloading their television shows? Anybody in here? Oh, yeah? Okay. Let me ask another question. Who watches a lot of Netflix? Who watches a lot of Netflix?
I don't own TV, I watch movies.
You watch Netflix, right? Anyone ever get a warning from their provider that says that they're getting close to their limit of using their... No? Okay, that's good. Then you don't... Yeah, on occasion? So bandwidth is how much uploading and downloading that you get to do, okay? And so when you're working with Rogers or Telus or that sort of, or Bell, they usually have caps for residential, right? So they'll say you get 150 gigabytes of data coming up and down per month, for example, before it resets for your next bill, right? So if you watch a lot of high definition streaming shows, or like are a fan of downloading Blu-ray quality Game of Thrones or something like that, you will find that you'll be eating through that pretty quickly, because a single Game of Thrones episode in like high def format is over a gig. So if you download a season's worth, 13 episodes, 12 episodes, that's 12 gigs right there. And then while you're doing that, you're also streaming a lot of audio or something like that. And you're also sending files to your friends over Dropbox, and you're also doing a bunch of other surfing. You're going to hit your 120 pretty quickly if you're doing a lot of this stuff. And if you're not doing your own web stuff right now, I guarantee you, as you get further into this stuff, you're going to find things that you like doing on the web. And when you find the things that you like doing on the web, that will start to erode on this. So that's your home bandwidth. Now, your host also provides bandwidth to the access of the content on your servers. So basically, every time someone visits your site, you're creating traffic. That data is moving from the server to the visitor visiting the site, right? If they've been there a few times and you don't have a lot of changes on your site, it actually caches that for the visitor sometimes, so not as much data gets sent through. But still, you're still hitting a little bit of traffic like this. So unless you're like a mega superstar, most plans are in the 300 to 500 gigabyte of traffic kind of range, and that's plenty. Unless you're collaborating with some people on a high-def video project that you are uploading through your FTP back and forth, and that is contributing to that as well. So things that can also eat up bandwidth that you don't really think about. If you've put up a what do you call it? A show like a show book, for example, or something like that, right? Like from a show you're having, and you have a PDF of it on your site. It's not called a show book. What's it called? What's that? Catalog. Thank you. A show book. Show book. So a catalog. You have a catalog on there, for example, and you've taken the time to lay out and make this beautiful PDF that is the same print version that went off to the printer, and you put that on there to download. Something like that could be like a few hundred megabytes, right? 1024 megabytes in 1 gigabyte. So, you know, if it's a popular show and people download, everyone that's come to visit downloads that catalog, you're eating through your bandwidth, right? Granted, they're probably not going to do it every month after the show. There's going to be a spike and then it'll drop down. Most servers and hosting companies don't cut you off when you've hit your limit. They just send you, most don't. They generally send you a friendly message and saying, hey, you're going over. Do do you realize that? Kind of thing. And you're like, well, it'll stop soon, or it's all, my billing date changes over in 2 days. So like, can we just let it go? And they'll be okay with that. But if you're pounding it because you have a really popular kind of file or something like that, that can become an issue. And then they might start charging you overages like that. Like, they'll sell you another 100 gigabytes from their $10 or something like that. It's not outrageously expensive or anything. It's just something to think about. In the old days, the bad old days, the all or nothing days, these things used to be really expensive. Like, you would be watching this thing. If you went over your bandwidth, like, you'd be like hit with $1,000 overage bill or something like that. It's a dark time. Anyone have any questions about bandwidth? So it's really important you remember this is separate from your own personal home bandwidth, though. Just make sure that's clear. Okay. So it's important knowing this, it's important to review your options. Reliability and security is key. Something we talk about when we talk about hosts is uptime, and how long the server's been up. And there's actually sites you can go and look at this, but I'm going to save you some time and tell you some stuff. One, every single hosting company will fail at least once per year. The degree of how badly they fail is what makes the difference, okay? The difference between a few hours, a few minutes, or in some cases, a few days. So for example, we use, for non-essential stuff, we use an American company called DreamHost. Some of the cheapest hosting you can get, great self-administering options. Tech support is virtually non-existent, but the panels are really easy to do things. You can add email addresses. You can do anything you want, even if you're a complete novice. It's pretty clear and pretty easy to do. However, every couple of years they seem to have a really bad outage that lasts like a week, and that can be really problematic if you're depending on this, right? Now, it's important to be realistic with yourself, though, about what depending on this means, though, right? So, for example, if you found a magical way to make money from animated cat GIFs, okay, and you're making a sizable income from this in some way, all right, being down for a week is a problem, right? Like life-threatening, as in my incredible business of where I am like basically the king of the world, or queen of the world, for like, animated cat GIFs, and making tons of money. Like I'm a head of an empire. This is a problem. You're going to need something more reliable than that. If it's your, catalog of your work and you update it quarterly or something like that, it may be okay if there's a problem like that. I'm not saying it's preferable and that you're not worth it, and I'm not saying I'm not valuing the work that you're doing, but in perspective for the amount of money it would cost to get more uptime, to pay the extra premium to ensure that it's the absolute best it can be, may not be worth it for you at this stage, right? You can always change this and always change where you're being hosted. So look for good customer support. I say this, but I'm going to give you the harsh reality of this. There's no such thing as good customer service or support from hosts in companies, and I'll tell you why. They invariably are very far away from wherever you are, and you've already given them your credit card. So they'll send nice emails and things like that, but the reality is if you are doing anything that isn't one of their control panel button features or something like that, they're really under no obligation to help you. Some of them have sysadmins that you can pay to do things. Sometimes it's better to look into the community and see if there's someone that you can work with that will help you. And there's lots of cool communities like this. I'm not sure about on the Savik side, of course, but now that you're here and you've discovered Miso and DMG and that sort of thing, there's people you can talk to about this kind of thing. Maybe they can help you. Do you need a database? So this question really comes down to whether or not you're going to be rolling your own website and doing your own, doing a lot of hand coding and hand setup. Or using a pre-existing or off-the-shelf package that you'll be installing yourself. Almost every one of the service providers will be looking for kind of like provides some sort of database thing, but some of them charge more for the access to that. And a database is what provides, if you're using a platform or package that allows you to upload images and manage it without doing code and that sort of thing, typically they are relying very heavily on a database to store your images and information. Okay? Doesn't mean you ever have to do anything with it once you install it. You may never have to know that you have one again, but this is something to think about when you're looking at hosting. I suggest looking for Linux, Unix / open source supporting servers, things that support LAMP, which is basically, I like LAMP. It's Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP. These are all free and or open source server configurations. They're industries, like a lot of industry standard, important big organizations use this. This isn't just because we're artists and we like to look for the cheapest option possible. It actually is a legitimate way of running a server. So some sort of competitors to give you a frame of reference is something like Microsoft still, and it was for a long time, the sort of standard for providing web services. If you've ever been to a website that says .asp at the end of like a file, so you're like at something, you look at the URL bar, then it says .asp or something, that means it's running off a Microsoft server. Microsoft charges for the licenses and upgrades and all those kinds of things that power a server, and those costs get passed down to you. Sometimes literally, like, you have to upgrade, please pay us $500. Sometimes it's just built into the monthly cost. So if you can find things that are LAMP based, you'll be happier. And the truth is like most give both, and I'd say almost all now give LAMP. So it's not like it's going to be hard. I'm just sort of explaining what that is. And if that's all Greek and you want me to try to explain a different aspect of that again, please let me know. I see around the room we've got a variety of Windows and OS X based computers, right? So Windows is an operating system, and so is OS X, and Linux and Unix are the operating system that runs the servers. Sitting on top of that is this concept of a web server, the thing that knows what to do when you go www. And process those incoming DNS requests, right? That is, in this case, Apache, the A in the LAMP. Okay, and Apache is a big open source project. It is open source, right? Yeah, it's a big open source project that is available for free that people are always working on and making better and better every day. And the M in the equation stands for MySQL or MySQL, which is the database. A database is exactly like, if you have used databases in the past to like do any inventory stuff or do any household kind of things or anything, it's the same thing. They just have more options that are better suited for this sort of web activity, right? So they'll have multi-relational tables, they'll have pointers and indexes and caching and all these things that allow pages to be served faster and more efficiently and to store different types of data. The P in the LAMP is PHP, which I don't think I've ever known what PHP stands for. I don't think anyone knows. I'm going to say nobody knows. It's a mystery lost to time. But what it actually is though it does script processing basically, or language processing that allows certain things to function. So for example, based on these conditions, when these buttons are clicked, access this piece of information from the database. That's PHP at work, right? When you see like sort of interactivity that's combining different elements from the database and from the web and all these kinds of things, that's an example of that happening. This is different though from HTML and CSS, which we'll talk about. Time for a scary story. Something to think about, Canadian hosting providers. Why would we look and care about a Canadian host? Anyone have any ideas of why we would care about a Canadian host? That's it. In some cases, believe it or not, that could make a difference depending on the type of business you are in and that sort of thing. But there is sort of the closest relative term, right? Like as in the city versus in Manitoba or something like that, right? Canada's pretty huge.
It's regulated.
So, yes, you're on this sort of thing, or rather, it's not as regulated potentially as what happens. So, shortly after 9/11, there was a wonderful act passed called the Patriot Act in the United States, right? And the Patriot Act allows lots of ridiculous amounts of things for the U.S. government to be able to do, but one of them is to immediately search and look through any server they want to with very little with no notice. They just basically can go do this. And this is separate from what we learned about from Prism and all this kind of stuff. Prism's a whole other. We all heard about Prism recently? Did you Prism? We'll start with the Patriot Act, then we'll work our way up to Prism. So the Patriot Act says they can go in and do whatever they want. So realistically, this means in the process, the server that you're on is going to be shut down and can be confiscated potentially if something on there, because many servers are shared environments, right? In fact, many servers, when I told you that they're on like a rack-mounted computer kind of thing, they're actually on a rack-mounted connected thing to other rack-mounted servers, all virtually being hosted in a very nebulous cloud-based idea, right? Where everyone's data processing and storage is all pooled in one kind of area, and there is a virtual server there. It's an idea of a server existing. So basically, if you can think of it this way, we hear about cloud, right? We've heard about in the cloud, right? When you go to Amazon and you're looking through the Amazon store and looking for different things, you're actually not generally hitting one machine, like the Amazon machine that you're hooked into. You're hitting a big pile of data and programming and everything all sort of floating around up there that is being distributed by lots of different machines. So it might be getting the click HTML and CSS, the stuff that describes the page from one area. It might be getting this from some database over here for the product description. It's pulling the comments from that annoying comment for that review of that book that you like, but this person doesn't like it. You know, it's all being pulled from different places, right? So, regardless, the U.S. Government can go in and actually look at it at will, kind of thing. Now, I generally don't have. I have a problem with that, but sometimes the cost and the type of work you're doing and the risk that you're doing in the stage of career or the stage of a project is in, it's just a lot cheaper to host in the States compared to a lot of places in Canada. Significantly cheaper. Like as in there's really no contest most of the time. So for me,